Well, hello, hello. Isn't this a bit of a surprise? Okay, so I know I wasn't able to stream yesterday, and I won't have time to stream today in the afternoon, so I decided to do a jump scare and give us a stream right in the morning. I actually prefer to stream at this time anyway, but it's not the best for traffic. So, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. You saw the title. There is a special announcement that needs to be made, and it would have been better to do it yesterday, but I'm okay with doing it now. I am making a new story. Now, don't expect any content on it quite soon. If you would like to see art, I do have a Blue Sky account where you could see it there. But for now, I just want to use this as a time to kind of go over it and talk a little bit about the channel's history and some of the work I have planned for the future. Is it the most entertaining subject? No. But don't worry, I got just the thing. Today, we are going to be working on an art piece, rather than a form of animation today. Mainly because you guys have caught me during my Saturday art work. I like to get work done on Saturdays and to kind of relax and do something that requires a little bit less effort. So I figured what better time than to just talk about the story. Also, quick disclaimer, I am very, very tired. I had to get up early to do this stream. Well, I mean, not too early, but a little bit earlier than that's considered average. So, this piece is going to be showcasing a new monster of mine. One thing I love to draw is monsters of both mythology and folklore. And today is going to be the Hellhound, but my own personal spin on it. It's less about location and more about his overall appearance. And that's what we're going to try and aim to do today. I'm going to block out some shapes though real quick. So, the new story. I think to truly understand what this new take on my creative storytelling abilities is to look back at its beginning. One of the first things that was ever introduced to this channel was Wolcott of the Stone and a separate story called The Mage's Monsters. I liked The Mage's Monsters. I wouldn't say it was groundbreaking or anything that was really worth anyone's time, but that's not the point. For me, I want a story that I love to create, and The Mage's Monsters was that. I loved making it. It was something that I enjoyed and a project that I would spend a lot of time on for, I think, about a year or two. However, shortly after its creation, I was struggling to find what I would turn it into. I mean, it could have always stayed a piece on the channel, like just artwork and animations. But I was really striving to have a story that I could have in a written form. If you've been on this channel recently, you might notice that obviously my attention is set on Ivar becoming a comic, and while this is true, my second love for the creative arts has always fell onto writing. And The Mage's Monsters, I thought, was going to be my ticket to finding a book series that I would be proud to present to a wider audience. I've actually been writing for a very long time. I think during the new year of 2020, I think it's almost been a decade. So 2026 would make it... could make it 16 years, but I'm not sure. Could be less, could be more. But that's pretty much the stakes I've been working with. Art became a second passion after I discovered writing. I wouldn't really get back into art until high school. But writing has always been something that I partook in and really enjoyed. There's only one problem with writing, is when I can't find a story, it makes it incredibly hard to be invested in any other form of writing. I don't know why, I just had like weird goals set. where I just felt the need to constantly be writing something, and it had to be a long form story. It couldn't be short. Nowadays, I write shorts all the time and I love them. But back then, my only thought was I needed a book, and if I didn't have a book, it wasn't a story. This is not true. You can write any size story you want. Doesn't need to be full. Doesn't even need to be a complete story. It just needs to be fun for you to create. Now, back to the Mage's Monsters. I can't really tell you what it was about per se, because I don't even think I knew what it was about. It starred 4 characters: Sol, who would eventually go on to be the mascot of my channel; Autumn, the mage with no magic abilities; and then 2 friends, Karabu and Nick, both of which were 2 different species in the world. Now, as far as character goals go, I don't think either of them had a clear message. But if I had to put something to them, I would probably say that their goal was to correct the wrongs in their life so that they could come home to their families. Because I will admit, each were a form of criminal. Sol was a thief. Autumn was exiled after injuring the son of their queen, like the prince, I guess. I don't even know if she was really considered a queen, but we're just going to call her a queen for the sake of this video. Karabu, we don't know what he did because I didn't write anything down. And Nick betrayed his society by becoming friends with Sol. So that's what brought us here. I don't like that paw. I think I need to make it bigger. So that was the baseline for the Mage's Monsters, and while it was exciting and I did really enjoy it, I could never really decide what I wanted to turn it into. I tried a book, and I even tried comics, and the story just never felt right. Looking back, I would say it's probably because I didn't flesh out the characters enough, which, if you're writing a book, please consider your characters. If you're writing just an A-B plot, sure, but if you really want to have a story that people remember, it's about the characters. People invest in the characters, not so much the story. Now, if you can have them invest in both together, that's even better. Yeah, I like that ball a little better. Okay, so after the Mage's Monsters could not find footing in either a comic or a book, they kind of were retired from the channel. I made a whole post about it, and we discussed how they would just be becoming mascots. And that's what Sol eventually did. The others kind of faded away from the channel, as I no longer had a need for them when I wasn't using them. Because again, remember, it's that mindset. I wanted a story that I could share, and if I didn't have a story, I didn't really put a lot of effort or time into them anymore. So they kind of faded into the background, and I never really explored what the Mage's Monsters could have been. And that's okay. If you have a story that you no longer want to invest time or your patience into, it's okay to say goodbye to it. It doesn't mean you're leaving it forever. It just means you want to expand into something different. Yeah, I made the critical error of obsessing over my stories sometimes, where I just felt like I needed to make them work. It's not a healthy headspace to be in. Okay, so what happened to the Mage's Monsters? Where did they go? Well, shortly after retirement, I would discover Ivar, and Ivar would be introduced to the channel, and he and Wolkas of the Stone would take over as the main source of storytelling I would do through the Soul Fox Pictures channel. But recently, as of 2025, I stumbled across my old love for the monsters of mythology and folklore. These would consist of like minotaurs, harpies, hellhounds, werewolves, vampires, even a cyclops dog, Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, stuff like that. I knew I still wanted to have a story that spoke about these creatures. Not only was it a great opportunity to explore the history behind them, but as well as represent them in a light that a lot of people don't see them in. Because when you think of a monster in mythology, you probably think of the first modern interpretation of them. Great example being sirens. A lot of people depict them nowadays as a fish-like creature. However, that's the mermaid. And mermaids weren't sirens. Their roles were different. The word siren didn't necessarily indicate it was a monster that lured people in through romantic interests. That's the mermaid. The mermaid was made to be beautiful and was to cause sailors to crash their ships into the rocks where the mermaid was, desperate to get to them. The sirens, however, were bird-like and were originally depicted in Greek mythology. They preyed upon people's internal desires and things they longed for. It didn't have to be love, it could be family and friends or people they've lost along the way. Honestly, I think they're more terrifying than a mermaid. But yeah, I wanted to try and get more accurate representation of some of the monsters, while also adding my own creative spin on their stories and lore. So we get the new story, who I unfortunately don't have a name for. For the purpose of this video, we are going to be referring it by two names: the Monster Story, or the Silver Wings, as I think that's a good representation of what the story's about. It'll make sense here in a minute. It would be during the early months of 2025 that I would sit down and write this story. And the first thing I realized was how difficult it was to write something. Because, I've been writing shorts up to this point, exploring the characters, but I never actually had to create a book-length story in quite some time, up till now. Now, is it anywhere near completion? No, we entered the editing phase, so that's something that I'm happy about. But stories take time, so unfortunately I don't have anything to share from the writing with you all today. But I can share a little bit about it in terms of its characters, its world, and where I would want to go in the future of this channel. One day I hope to bring the main character, whose name, as of now, is James. I call him Jimmy for short. James, I hope to bring him and his friends from the story to the channel one day through art and other animations and animatics. But for now, they're just going to remain art pieces, as that's what I can manage at the moment. Excuse me, I need to check something. I got coffee to drink this morning. It's very good coffee. It's a caramel macchiato. Alright, so I'm going to answer a question real quick that I feel like some people are going to have. I do a lot of storytelling. I've made comics of Ivar, and I've spoke a little bit about Wolcas of the Stone through YouTube. And now I'm introducing this third story. Some of you are probably wondering what happened to the Wolcas of the Stone. Like, where'd they go? Now, do not worry, Wolcas of the Stone is still well and alive on my creative journey. But as of a form of telling the story yet, I haven't really quite decided. I would love to have it be a short story, but where it stands now while I'm writing this book about the Silver Wings, it's just a lot, and since this story is so much bigger than Wolcas of the Stone, I figured I'd give Wolcas of the Stone a little bit of a break while we explore this new story. Now don't worry, I'm still making animations, I'm still making animatics, and it will probably remain the main thing I create on the YouTube channel. But as for something I'm going to write, I'm going to give that dream a rest just for a little bit. I'll probably release a short or two, but that's probably going to be about it. Woke of the Stone will remain primarily a YouTube animation series, and this new story with James and the Silver Wings, it's going to be the main form of writing. It's going to be my book. Another reason why I chose to write the Silver Wings in the first place was the main character is very personal to me. Something I struggle with and I've seen people around me deal with multiple times over. This need to belong and be rejected from society. I believe it's more common than I think it is at this very moment, and I feel like it's not represented in a way that I'm happy with. So I set out to make a book about a character in a similar situation, and the rest was history. We got the Silver Wings, and their first book is done, but in the editing phase. What I've been doing with it right now is creating these drawings of different scenes, of different monsters, and kind of testing the water and see if anybody would ever be interested in a book like this. Of course, at the end of the day, I'm creating a story that I want to create. And while, yes, it is true, when you're writing a book, you do need to consider a future audience, you don't necessarily consider that audience while you're writing your first draft. Because then you'll be obsessing about things that don't necessarily matter in this moment. When you write your first draft, you have to write for you. And that's the most important piece of information I can give you today. You write for you first and foremost. Afterwards, when you're doing the editing phase, you can begin considering an audience and applying that to your work. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Who is this James? Why is he the main character of this story? Well, full name is actually James Burrow. He's from a little town on the corner of the mainland, trying to find his place in the world after the recent passing of his mother and father. He thought he had it figured out, to an extent. Life wasn't perfect, it has its ups and downs. But at least he was here, and at least he had a job with a position in a very important group of people. In the story, there are two things a person can be. If he's born a male, he is given the opportunity to participate in the most glorified position in the mainland, as a guard member. These fleets of strong-powered soldiers and artillery were designed to protect the people of the mainland from outside forces. And if you were born a male but did not have it cut out for the guard, there wasn't a lot more you could do, unfortunately. Even women had more options for themselves than the male who could not participate in the guard. Which is where it puts Jimmy. James Burrow was one of these people that could not fit in with the others of his own species. He wasn't big enough to be a guard member, but he wasn't allowed to just be someone who took care of the home or could be in other forms of work around the mainland, mainly because he wasn't a woman. He's kind of this oddball in the middle, and he's not really even sure who he is anymore. Which brings us to the stake of the story. Everything comes to a crashing halt after his world is intercepted by mythology-based creatures. The first being a great silver bird as it descended from the sky. And this would change his entire world going forward. I aim to create not only a story that discusses the history of these amazing creatures, but also explores the deeper meanings of James's own life and how he deals with some of the struggles that he'll have to put up with as the story goes deeper in. We also feature a creature in the story who's a creature of my own design. He's not from any mythology, and he ends up being James Burrows' best friend. Yeah, friend's kind of a rough term, but for the purpose of this video, we'll call him a friend. And this man, or monster, I should say, name is Ranja. He is... I don't really have a name for the species yet, but it looks like a giant lion humanoid. And its main abilities rely heavily on... what was it? Elements. Yeah, it relies heavily on the elements around it. Yeah, but he too finds himself in a position where he can be easily outcasted. So it brings the two together as they search for meaning and purpose in this world and battle their way to find a place that they can truly call their own. So that's, in a very, very brief nutshell, the Silver Wings, or the monster story. Originally, I was going to try and bring back the Mage's monsters through this story. Ranja was going to be Sol, and James was going to be Autumn. But I eventually I kind of stopped with the idea early into the development stage, because I just didn't care for the characters anymore. I really do still like Sol. His design has actually given me my entire brand identity. But as a character, I didn't have him fleshed out enough, nor did I care so much for its personality, and I didn't think it was what this story needed going forward. Autumn. Yeah, I just didn't care for Autumn. Autumn was really boring. And now, I did say once, I don't believe in saying that a character is boring when you haven't given them the time and energy to truly understand them. And that's exactly how I'll put in Autumn's case here, is that I did not understand her enough to truly enjoy her as a character. Nor do I feel like giving her that time. So I won't say that she's boring, but I did not feel like creating anything with her anymore. So I retired them officially and moved on to these new characters, trying to write this little book. I actually wrote in it a little bit this week for the editing side of things. We had to add I think it's going to be 3. We had to add 3 more chapters because the introduction to a third character in the story, who's not really a main. He kind of serves as the antagonist, but I wanted him to have a POV as well. In the first draft, he was not introduced until way late in the story. And, excuse me, I need to get a drink of coffee. Yeah, he was introduced rather late into the story. And while I do think he was pretty good with his current introduction, I just wanted to flesh him out a bit more, as I felt like there's a lot more he could do with this story if we got to know him a little better before we saw him. I hope this is making sense. Writing is a very complicated and very subjective world. Some people really like it, others don't care for it. And some people really want to write but can't write. And I sympathize with those people, because for a long time I wanted to write, but I didn't think any of the things I wrote were good. How I got to the point where I was actually feeling confident enough to write my own book is non-existent. I actually didn't feel confident to write this story. I just sat down and said, I want to do this. And I did it. The first draft is rough, it's messy, and there's some parts that I actually cannot read because they're so boring. But I'm proud of that I finished something. Proud that I have something to present and go back into to try and improve. And I think that's honestly a lesson that we can all take away from writing, or any form of art. If you want to do something, you can't spend your entire life wishing you could do it when you haven't even tried to do it. Now, what can make this acceptable, at least I would say, is if you've given it an attempt before. And I'm not saying I tried to draw something with a pencil, it looked ugly, so I gave up. I'm saying that you've actually put the work and the effort in and it never went anywhere, or you just found that you don't really care for writing. That, I think, could have some exception to the rule. A great example to this, I think, is I gave painting a try a long time ago when I was young. And I saw how it was another form of art that I could bring to life, just like my traditional comics and my traditional sketches I drew in journals. And I was like, I want to paint. I never learned how to paint correctly. And now I know there's a lot more work I could still put in to actually achieve a work that I would be proud of. But after years and years of trying, and painting never getting any easier, I found that I much prefer the digital painting world over the physical painting world. Now, this is not meant to say anything mean about people who can traditionally paint. I actually admire and adore you. I wish I could paint. But as things stand, I'm just not a painter. And that's okay. You don't have to be everything, and you don't have to be good at everything. You just need to find a medium that you enjoy and pursue that. Artists don't get to a point where they stop learning. If an artist believes that he no longer needs to learn, then this is dangerous. You should always be open to learning. You should always feel like you need to learn something. Because, as I put earlier, this is a subject that's very subjective. Some people feel like art needs to be one way, and others think that it needs to be another. Same with writing. I don't think there's really any two ways about it. Art is just art. Whether it be music, writing, drawing, painting, it's all just different forms of media coming together and allowing people to express themselves. There's no real rule that says that this is correct. Are there professionals in a field? Yeah, are there rules in some of these things? I think so. And you can learn a lot from these rules. But at the end of the day, what you enjoy might not be what someone else enjoys. And what you can do might not be what someone else can do. But you have to try. If you don't try, you'll never know. I wanted to write a book, and if I didn't sit down one day and write out the first chapter, we wouldn't be even talking about this story. We'd be talking about how I wish I could write and how I wish I had a book. I'd much rather have the opportunity to try than to sit there and never do anything at all. Okay, I gotta draw out some textures real quick. Oh, I realized I left out an important detail with the Silver Wings. Is this story is kind of like an adventure story. James and his friend Ranja are scouts for the Silver Claw. Kinda. Basically, this means that they go on these adventures and try and find the other monsters that are scattered across the world. Which leads us to this picture here. This beastly looking thing over here is the Hellhound. And I actually have a whole story dedicated to these creatures. But we're not going to go into it, as I don't want to spoil anything. But I felt like it would be cool to actually see the story in action for once. Most of the pictures I've shared on my Blue Sky account are just art pieces of my interpretation of the monster. Sometimes talking about their history, as well as talking a little bit about their impact on the current world, like the modern world. How we depict these creatures in our own stories. Well, I want to move a little bit away from that. While I do enjoy making those concept art pieces, my true passion is to create stories in my art, to create something that people can look back on. Hold on, we seem to be having a little bit of issues. I feared this. We might cut. My connection is still a little bit weak. I do apologize. I don't know if this is gonna fix. We'll see here in a couple seconds. Let me try something. It's still showing the error code. This might have to be a very short stream today if this error code doesn't go away. Yeah, we've been having issues here ever since the storm yesterday. It wasn't even really rain, it was just a bunch of wind. But it was so bad it was knocking out the power. Hold on, let me check with something real quick, see if I can get this fixed. We're moving a little bit. Isn't horrible. I'm gonna try and keep going, see if I can get this thing to work. Oh yeah, what I was saying, scene pictures. I want to start moving a little bit into scene pictures, so I can have not only more emotion, but as well as seeing the characters in action and representing the world in a way that I feel happy to share. Let's begin with this guy. Actually, you know what we should do first, I think, is decide on the colors. So I'm going to make the background faint and keep these guys up. Something I've been experimenting with lately is colors, and trying to get a little better at my use for them. We're going to start with this kind of blue color. And then we're going to move on to using these more kind of orangey red colors. What I'm doing here is a little form of color theory. Now, color theory needs an entire video in itself to explain. But what I'm basically doing is using opposite colors on a harmony spectrum. Because your eyes will be naturally drawn to something that is on two different sides. Yellow and blue, for example, cause this effect. But if I want to darken this, we need to go back to this. We're going to make it lighter and we're going to move this dial up. Now, obviously these aren't final colors. This is just me mapping out what I would like the scene to look like, so that I have a reference point to look back on when the piece is finished. Okay, so the creature has to look... Let's go with like a red or something. Because he needs to stand off as well. Kind of needs like a shadow or something, so we're just gonna scribble a really quick shadow on him. Try and get the feel. And the human will need a shadow as well. So we're going to scribble on a shadow for him. And there we go. This is the color schemes for the picture. It's what I'm going to refer back to and hope to actually achieve with this piece. Now, let's do the background first, as I feel like we need to get an understanding for this. We'll start with this peachy color. But yeah, so look forward to, in the future, some introduction of some new things. I would like to bring the Silver Wings, or the monster story. I would really like to bring it to the channel. I don't know yet if I'm going to do just small YouTube shorts or are they going to actually be long animatic videos that you could watch, similar to the Who I'd Be animatic I made a couple years back. Whatever it turns into, all I hope is that the story isn't just something you look at, say it's pretty, and move on. Because while that is, well, obviously the point of art, my real goal is to share this story with someone who might need it. And I know that might sound a little cliche, but it's true. I want this story to mean something, not just to me, but I hope that maybe it might mean something to someone else. I think a lot of us as artists long to have the story we imagine be seen for what we see it as. A lot of people want their stories to be liked. They want their characters to be loved. And maybe it's just an internal thing because, we like the validation. But part of me finds that this comes from an idea that we feel like we have a story we want to share. And this is my story that I would like to share. Don't know if I like this color. We're just kind of playing with things here. That's another thing of art. You always got to be open to mistakes and fixing those mistakes by just playing around a little bit with colors. Just bring this up and find maybe kind of like a gray. Art is just a lot of trial and errors, I noticed. It's always one thing, then it's another. You can't fix them all. Actually, I'm going to bring up the line art again, because it still has a small, or a light opacity, I mean. There we go. So, yesterday I brought up about the connection issue. I don't know why, but for some reason in this area specifically, the wind gets very nasty by the change in seasons typically. From like winter to spring, summer to fall. There's always a small patch of time where the wind gets completely out of control. When I was younger, we used to have a trampoline in the backyard. One year, when one of these particularly strong winds hit, we actually lost the trampoline. We didn't know where it went. Went outside, it was gone. This is why they recommend putting sandbags on the legs. Because if you don't, they become a flying hazard and can hurt someone. That is exactly what happened to our trampoline. It flew into the neighbor's yard. Thankfully, it happened in, let's say, middle of the night. So nobody was outside, nobody got hurt. But it definitely wasn't pretty. It just casually flew on over. So yeah, that's why we're having internet troubles today and yesterday. It was threatening to knock out the power last night. And I was even debating doing what I'm doing right now. But I really wanted to share this story. Didn't want to keep anyone waiting for the stream. And I figured I might as well risk it. So I could be here to talk to you all. And I don't know if I like these colors, but just kind of playing around with them. Need something closer to the other color. There we go. I think you're probably starting to see here my issues with painting. I still can't paint even as a digital artist. But that's what I'm striving to get a little better at as time goes on. I don't think I like that either. Let's try darkening it, maybe? Having a little difficulty blending this orange color together. Maybe it needs to be more green. We're definitely closer. Let's try adding our background and see how it looks after that. Check our color reference. We're gonna make this kind of like a yellow. So yeah, that's all really I wanted to share was the new story. It's something that I'm not only very passionate about, but I also feel like it might change the direction of the channel just slightly. I don't think it would be anything drastic, but you might see in the next couple of years or so a dramatic shift in my promotion of the story. You know what they say, it's very important to get the story out there so that people can see it, be engaged with it, and actually want to read the story by the time it's done. So here very soon, you'll probably see art pieces coming out more frequently. You'll probably see the actual story being shared with maybe you guys. I hope so, because I would like to share the first few chapters and get an idea and feel of how the story is being received. It can be very scary to share a new story with other people. You never know. Because while you love it, and that is the most important thing in my opinion, at the end of the day, you're still sharing a story with someone and hoping in the chance that they will like it. And I find that very daunting. We need to go back up to the yellows. Just gonna do a test line here to see how I feel about this yellow color. Let's see if I can change the color of this one. Need to fix this, I think. Let me refer to the color again. Yeah, it's a lot darker. Okay, I'm just gonna redo the colors. I'm not happy with them. Yeah, sorry if I'm a little quiet during stream. It is very early here and I don't want to wake anybody. So we're just vibing a little bit as I work out the color scheme for this piece. Actually, I think I'll get the airbrush for that. There we go. Painting's one of the skills that I'm thinking about reviving. Just trying to get a little bit better at it. Because I know that there's things I could improve upon. Like right now, obviously. Color is not one of my strong suits. But hey, we're learning. You always have to learn. You can't really do anything and not learn nothing. I can use this for like grassy details. So what's something else that we could talk about? Oh yeah, let's talk a bit more about the characters in the story. Something that I genuinely enjoy. I did say it was an OC lore stream after all. One thing that I think I'm the most proud of when it comes to the story really is the main character, James. And not just because he's, well, the main character. I think one of the reasons why I enjoy him so much was because he was the most difficult to write. And when a character is difficult to write, I think that says something. Not only from our understanding of what we want them to go through, but also the idea that they're challenging our current perception of a story. In this case, I knew I wanted him to be like the odd one out, like the traditional outcast of society, but I didn't want to make it in such a way that he was clearly different. I wanted to try and represent it. That's a good way to put it. I wanted to represent it as if it's not really even his fault. And maybe it is something that's not really about him than it is by the way the society is structured around him. And I know that sounds like the traditional story, but stick with me. One thing that stuck out to me about him was his perception of the world. Something that challenged the way I had to write his character overall is shortly after the passing of his mother was what really kind of kicked things off for him as a character. This happens long before the actual main narrative of the story, but he spends a lot of time thinking about her, simply because her words had the most significant impact on him growing up. She told all these fantastical stories and shared fairy tales about monsters in faraway places. But he never took any of them as actually real, rather than just spending time with her. And that's something that I aimed to do was actually based off a writing prompt I saw some few years ago. Probably a year by now. And it said something about how most traditional stories center around father, son, mother, daughter, daughter, son, daughter, father movies. And while I enjoy all those very much, one story that gets kind of slept on a lot is the mother-son stories. And I don't know if there's a reason for this, or if just that no one can think of a way to represent it in a story. But I wanted to try that. I wanted to try and write something that was a little different than the traditional way we would look at him as a character. And that was to showcase Jimmy's relationship with his mother. And this opened an entire can of worms for the story going forward. It would be very, very different. And I would be asked, and even tasked with, really, to understand these pieces about Jimmy that would ultimately design his whole character. One of them being that he always wanted a true connection with his mother. And while they spent a lot of time together and she would be considered the main source of his childhood for help and guidance, one thing he didn't have was he really didn't know her. And that's why I want the story to focus on is knowing somebody. Like, what does it mean to know somebody? And why he doesn't. And that's why I like Jimmy. I think he's an interesting stretch for my creative mind and really asked me to challenge my current views on how I want to write a character. as he's a bit more down to earth. Remus and Kanu kind of represent my... Kanu, yeah, especially Kanu. Kanu really kind of represents the sides of anxiety and not really sure where you fit in the world, stuff like that. Remus is kind of like an extreme extrovert that kidnaps him and says, "You're gonna be my friend now, let's go on amazing adventures." And that was that. Jimmy to me is a lot more complicated, wherein he... Actually, I don't really know how to put this into words. I feel like I'm going in circles, but he really is a different character than what I typically create. Because he asked of me not to create a character for the sake of creating him, but rather to create a character that could best represent the story I wanted him to tell. And that included some sad bits and serious moments, and I think that's one reason why I enjoy the story. It's really challenging of both my writing abilities and current views. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm kind of just talking out loud. But you know what they say, first and foremost, you gotta love your stories. So if this is what you want to write, you go ahead and write it. Well, wait a minute. One thing came up recently in the story that's really been bugging me. And since it's in such an early stage of writing, it's very tempting to add new things onto the already currently existing world. And that's kind of what I'm experiencing in this moment. Is I have a story, I have a structure that I want the story to go by. But for whatever reason, I recently had stumbled across a new way to look at the story that isn't what I initially wanted it to be. Gonna be introducing new concepts, new characters, and maybe even an entirely new direction for it to go. And all of this involves a silver feather, hence the name The Silver Wings. I would really, really like this story to work out, as I think this new narrative could be rather interesting to explore. One problem: if I do accept this new edition of the story, it will probably change the entire thing again, which is not something I look forward to. So yeah, that's fun. That's writing. I don't know why it does that, but it just likes to challenge you. I'm gonna give a break on the background piece so I can focus on the person. I'm also gonna change the yellow. Let me just save this color. There we go. Save the yellow. Now I can take it off. So I think I am going to have to go soon, because it is getting later in the evening and I got somewhere I need to be. It was very fun talking about this new story with you. I apologize for the ramble in the middle, but I'm just very excited to get to share this story with you all soon. I hope to one day have the first few chapters available so that you'll be able to read it, and hopefully have a couple animations and animatics done so that you can be able to see the story in a form that I also enjoy. Now, why it didn't become a visual form was for two reasons. Number one, Wokas of the Stone is currently my pride and joy, and currently rules the channel as my main form of storytelling and animation. Ivar is taking over the comic aspect of my life, and I don't really need two comics. I also just feel that writing is more personal to the characters' innermost feelings. And that's something that I really do want to share through James over here, is the innermost internal struggles that he goes through. I just feel like they need to be given the attention that they deserve to truly be what I want them to be. And yes, the story will feature many, many monsters, so if you have a favorite folklore monster or creature of mythology, you may or may not see it in the story. And if you don't see it in the story, feel free to let me know in comments and on different videos or art pieces what monsters that you would like to see me draw. Because while not every single one is going to make it into the books, I will, however, make it a goal to draw as many as possible before the release of the book. And I'm willing to take what's a good word for it? I'm willing to take suggestions. If there's any monsters out there that you would like to see represented through my art style, or represented in the light that it should have been treated with from the very beginning. But as always, keep making stories, and I'll see you in the next stream. Let me just show you real quick what we got done though. This picture will be available to see probably next week, so if you would like to see how it turned out, stay tuned.